Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the next conversation we're having in the month of May in 2024, whatever year it is that we're joining you. This month, we are talking about mental health foundations, and we have Keri Cooper of Keri Cooper Holistic Therapy joining us, specifically talking about just that, how to help build mental health foundations for your teenagers. If you missed the conversation we had last week with Dr. Lauren Pasqua about taking care of your own mental health, be sure to tune in. And today, though, we're shifting to how I'm imagining our own mental health impacts our kids and how we can model a lot of that. So, good morning, Keri. Thanks for joining me.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Mental health really is a driving factor behind everything that we do at Parent Tween Connection. I am a firm believer and have been since day one that the more knowledgeable and supported parents feel, the better they can connect with their teenagers and the better they can advocate for their teenagers. And ultimately, the fewer kids, hopefully, we're going to have navigating mental health challenges. And worst case scenario, the fewer kids we're going to lose to their own hands. So I was thrilled in our pre-conversation today that you said, man, I love talking to parents because the more we can educate the parents, the easier my life becomes with the teenagers. So why don't we start with kind of that, and let's talk about what you do and how you support the teenagers, and then we'll go into our points about mental health specifically for the kids.
Sure. So I have been a mental health therapist for almost 25 years at this point, and I've always focused on really teenagers. That's the population I love. You either love them or you hate them. There is no in between with this crowd.
Yes.
So people see me for individual therapy, my office or a telehealth, and so much of the stuff that comes up is about how they wish their parents would respond differently, what they wish their parents knew. And, I'm very fortunate that I have some great parents who will come into my office for a session with me and say, like, how do I do this better? How can I make this better? And to be that vulnerable as a parent and to be able to say, like, I know I don't have all the answers, but I'm willing to hear and to change is the best, because parenting is hard. It is hard. Nobody has it down. I'm a parent of 4 children. And it's like, you think you got it down with one child and the next child is completely different with their needs. So it is hard. It's so important for parents to really understand that, like, everyone's struggling to some degree. You're not alone. It doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't make you a bad parent. Get rid of the shame and the guilt. It doesn't need to be there. And that's so hard. That's so hard.
I was going to say that is so much more easily said than done.
Yes.
And that's actually another driving factor with Parent Tween Connection for folks tuning in is, societally, it is, broadly speaking, more acceptable to talk about the challenges that we face with littles. It's more acceptable, finally, to talk about things like postpartum depression and to talk about latching and breastfeeding and sleep training and all the things that are associated with littles, because we know that when the kids are little, parents don't know what they're doing. And yet, culturally, somehow there's this disconnect that, fast forward a decade and everybody seems to think that everybody else has it figured out, and they think that they're the only ones who don't. But then, to your point about shame and guilt, is it's not like that. The challenges that we face with teenagers are so vastly different, and many of them have a much higher level of immediacy. When we're talking the decisions the teenagers are making, whether it's the proverbial sex, drugs, and rock and roll, those have immediate consequences in many cases, whereas, not to denigrate or to lessen the challenge, but potty training isn't as immediate of a consequence in a lot of cases. Again, no less important, but different in the outcome. And so there's a lot of shame built in around that. So if parents are like, yeah, Keri, haha, get rid of the shame and guilt, we get that it's way more easily said than done.
Absolutely. I was giving a talk one day. I give talks a lot at schools for parents. And I was giving a talk one day, and at the end, at first, no one's really asking questions. And then people start opening up a little. And this one mom was so vulnerable. And she's like, I never thought it'd be this hard. And I'm screaming and saying things that never in a million years would I think that I would say to my own child. And another parent in the back goes, wait a second. You're struggling too? You're my neighbor. And I thought you had it all together. And she's like, I'm falling apart. And then all the parents were like, us too. And it was so empowering for all these parents to hear.
Absolutely. And as the teenager myself back in the day, right, of a parent who I'm sure thought everything was falling apart, she didn't
Mhm.
have a support system. And so that's one of the reasons that I love bringing people like you in to talk or to have conversations with families so that they know, families, you're not alone.
No, you're not
Nobody
alone.
else has this locked down. And mental health is something that we do need to pay massive attention to. So let's go there because that's the point that we wanted to have today. When we're talking about setting our kids up for mental wellness, right? And first of all, by the way, this doesn't just start when the kids like magically hit 10. Yes, we say at Parent Tween Connection that we largely support families between the ages of 10 and 20, but those are very perforated edges. Many of the habits that we're going to be talking about, Keri, I'm sure you're going to encourage us to start when our kids are younger. But let's start with the physical aspect of things.
Mhm.
I mean, I've certainly experienced this, but the mind body connection, the mind emotion connection, where do we even start with this?
So everybody, when I say like your physical health impacts your mental health, everyone goes, yeah, of course, that sounds right. But then no one's taking that next step to actually make sure that they're incorporating that and teaching that to their children. And
Hmm.
after doing this for so long, I've seen the connection. Um, your mental health will always be a struggle if you don't have your physical health down. So I always say there's five things. It prompted me because I talk about this so much. I wrote a book, Mental Health Uncensored 10 Foundations Every Parent Needs to Know, and it goes through all of them.
Hmm.
So the first one is water. You have to be hydrated. Your children have to be hydrated. Exactly. You're drinking your water. And an easy step that parents can take is get rid of all the junk in your house in terms of soda, energy drinks, juice. They don't need it. And it's going to save you money. Like that's a step that actually saves you money. Just
Hmm.
have water. But they don't realize it's actually linked to a lack of focus. It's linked to anger management issues. There's actually science
Hmm.
behind it. You have to be hydrated. Your children should understand this from a very early age. You should be having water at every meal. That is something parents can do immediately to help their
Hmm.
child's mental health. It's that simple sometimes.
Well, and again, that's one of those things that the earlier you start, the less pushback you're going to get.
Absolutely. But again, even if they're older, primarily you're the one doing the food shopping or an
Hmm.
adult is in the house if you're not buying the junk. And listen, yes, when they're out with their friends, they're going to get their Starbucks, their whatever. Fine. Because again, it's about balance. It's not all or nothing.
Hmm.
So all you could do is really control what's in your house,
Right.
especially as
Right.
they get older. So
Absolutely.
water's a huge, huge, huge one. The other thing that I always push is exercise. But I want to make it very clear that we don't teach our children to exercise because of weight, because of what their body looks like. We teach them to exercise because it helps clear your mind. It
Hmm.
helps clear your mind. It helps your, feel good chemicals get kicking in. And it helps
Hmm.
you feel strong and powerful and like you can accomplish things. That's why we push exercise. But I'm
Hmm.
going to tell you, it's very hard to tell your child to exercise or to do something, movement wise when you as a parent are not doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That.
that. And if you as a parent are not carving out time to take care of yourself physically, that's a
Hmm.
much bigger issue because
Well,
now you're overwhelmed and now you're stressed and now it's all dumping on top of your kids. And you got to be able to take the time for yourself.
and that's something that I often emphasize to families, especially, when the kids are little, it is feasible for the parents more to control their activities. Like, hey, we're
Mhm.
getting in the car, we're going to this activity. Hey, we're getting in the car, we're going to that activity. The older the kids get, the more challenging that becomes
Yes.
and the less control a parent has, but the more influence a parent has. And
Mhm.
not just the parents, but the people around them, the aunts, the uncles, the grandparents, the honorary aunts and uncles, right? And the more that the kids see the adults actually living these things, the more influential the parents are. I remember looking back, like my mom passed away because of the complexities that come with obesity,
Mhm.
and I have very few recollections of my mother ever exercising. And I saw that she was unhappy. I saw that she was trapped in a body that wasn't working well because of a lot of that. And so I, from my experience with families, also working in the family space for 25 years, I want to underscore to parents, the more you demonstrate this and that you live it authentically, the easier it is with the kids.
Yes, and it's how you speak about it. Like I go for a
Mhm.
run and I come home, I'm not talking about how many calories I burned when I'm running. I'm talking about, "Oh my gosh, I got my second wind and like I ran a little bit further than I did yesterday and I'm so proud of myself."
Mhm.
And that's the conversation my children hear around exercise. And you're right, it's so much easier when they're younger. But even as they get older, it's like, "Hey, let's go rock climbing together. Hey, let's go on a hike together. Let's go for a walk around the block together."
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
and those are great moments to have with your kids.
Well, and they're great opportunities for connection as well, beyond exclusively the physical benefits and the mental well-being benefits. It's an opportunity for you to connect being side by side. So we could go off on a tangent on that. So hydration and exercise. What
Yes,
else, Carrie?
food. Oh my gosh, food. You need to eat real food. 90% of your chemicals are actually made in your gut. If you are not eating well, you are going to have a host of issues. And I think everyone knows it, but then we say, "Oh, well, we're busy," or, they don't even know what real food looks like at this point.
Right.
It is so important to be in your household providing real food, to have that dinner every single night together as much as you can. I know that there's just a reality with that. But
Mhm.
actually, family dinner is a whole nother separate piece of this. If you look at the research around family dinner, sitting down to dinner together without electronics, it's going to improve grades. It's going to decrease drug use. Like all of these things are linked to family dinners. But also, it's about teaching your kids, like, how do we eat? There's a lot of times when kids tell me, "Well, my mom doesn't sit down at the dinner table. She's like up and cleaning or, like running food back and forth." And they say to me, "It's because she doesn't really eat." Kids pick up on way more than what you're realizing.
Mhm.
So when you have a bad relationship with food and you think you're covering it up, you're not. They're catching on.
Mhm.
So it's so important for you to honor yourself and be like, "I need to do what's good for me." See a therapist. Put yourself first.
Mhm.
Get your own help because you're going to break that cycle of passing that down to your kids.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
along with the food mentality, they need to have fruits and vegetables and protein. And this is important stuff. And they should understand that food can be delicious, even if it's healthy. Get them in the kitchen cooking with you.
So here's a question. I think back to my days as a teenager. I'm pretty convinced my mother hated cooking.
Yeah.
Hated it. So and to be fair, I am not a stellar cook. I can
Mhm.
I can function, but my husband definitely is much more the cook in my relationship. If it was on me to cook for a family, I would feel so overwhelmed and so incapable.
Mhm.
So let's talk to those parents, right? What if
Mhm.
they're that in that situation, or even, single parents who are trying to navigate all of the things? What are some effective ways that they can do this, that they can bring healthy
Yeah.
meals into their worlds with their kids, um, if they don't feel like they're the next, cuisine
Yeah.
fanatic?
Don't overthink it and keep it so simple because some of it is just so simple. And a lot of it is about planning and meal prep. And listen, there's definitely times where I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I have to plan dinner again this week."
Right.
Yes. But I'm a big fan of Pinterest and I get a lot of quick, easy recipes from Pinterest. Most of the time on a Sunday, I'll chop up a bunch of vegetables, make a big salad. That's going to last for a few days, which is fantastic. I might roast a few vegetables. That way I'm just, making a protein. Keep it simple. It's really, you don't need to go crazy. It could
Got
be grilled chicken and some roasted vegetables, maybe some rice or quinoa, and that's a fantastic meal. But
it.
also
Hmm.
get your kids involved, especially the older they are. Tell them, find a recipe. Find a
Yeah.
recipe, tell me the ingredients. Let's do this.
Right. What's your take on some of the home delivery meal options, like where they're pre-portioned and I mean, there's a cost to them, but
There's a
so
cost to them, but
many
I also
families.
think that they're a really great option, and we've definitely used them in the past as well. When I look at my week, I look at like, oh, this week's going to be crazy. What can I throw in a crock pot? What can I cook now and the kids could heat up later? So sometimes, listen, for you to cook it yourself is already so much healthier than just buying it out somewhere.
Mhm.
So I might make chicken cutlets one day. And I always make way more than I need, and I'll freeze them. And then the next week when I know things are crazy, take them out of the freezer, throw them in the oven real quick, and they're done.
Right.
So again, like you don't need to be a great cook. And something that I've seen recently happening with parents, which I love, a bunch of like families and parents will get together and actually have like a cooking day together. And like it's fun.
Hmm.
And like they're eating apps and like one person's cooking chicken cutlets and another person's like roasting a ton of vegetables and then they kind of split it all up amongst themselves. So
Well,
it's
that's a
also like,
fascinating concept.
isn't that interesting?
Mhm.
But it's like it kind of brings you all together
Right.
and then you're all kind of sharing the workload and you're having fun doing it.
And I imagine there might be a glass of something thrown in if parents choose to
Right.
participate in that.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay. All right. So we're talking again physical, we're talking hydration, we're talking physical movement, we're talking eating well in some
Yeah.
ways. We've actually had some other guests in the past specifically talk about how to handle this food prep piece of things, and similar concepts to what you're talking about like, prep more than you need, freeze it, take ground beef, for example, 1 week, this is going to be a beef week, and prep a whole bunch of it and prep it 7 different ways or 5 different ways, whatever. And then you can, or, prep it pretty basic and then it can be modified into different meals.
Yeah.
What else?
Um, the other thing that I love, and I always have to kind of explain it a little bit, is meditation.
Mm.
And everyone's like, "Oh, I don't meditate." Let me let me tweak this a little for you. So, in terms of meditation, I mean practicing staying in the moment. When we are in the moment, we're not worried about what's happened in the past that we can't change. We're not feeling bad about it, and we're not
Mm-hmm.
anxious about what may or may not happen in the future.
Right.
And unfortunately, our brains have just been going, going, going. And it's very hard for us to take a seat and go, let me practice just being right here, right now.
Mm-hmm.
So, how do you instill this into your children? Go on a mindful walk. Teach them about that. Be like, let's go for a hike. Let's just notice. What do I hear? What do I see? And teaching them to be in the moment because you feel one, so relaxed, and two, you're literally training your brain.
Mm-hmm.
So when things are going too fast in the future, being like, wait, nope, come back, come back. So I say go for a mindful walk, engage in mindful eating where you're really just focused on, ooh, okay, let me taste this, let me smell this, let me be here in the moment. And also there's a million and one apps at this point too for guided meditations, for, sound bowl relaxation, for progressive muscle relaxation.
Mm-hmm.
And especially when they're young, lay down with them and do this with them.
Sure.
Oftentimes, I'm like, family meditation, everyone in the living room. And like 10 minutes, we all lay down. It's like, oh. But again, it's them understanding why it's important.
Right. Well, and it goes back to, I know one of the points that you wanted to make is modeling this behavior for them, which again, that modeling is how we influence them as they get older,
Yes,
and it shows them, hey, I'm doing it too. And again, it's an opportunity for connection with them.
it is. It's a great opportunity for connection, even if it's just 10 minutes. That makes a
Hmm.
big difference.
Hmm.
Parents always think like they need like this grand scheme of like connection and meaningful moments. And it's like, just get the small stuff.
Hmm.
Those few minutes of meditation, that walk around the block, like that's the good stuff. It doesn't
Well,
have to be too big.
and a lot of times you hear parents or families talk about how, like, when kids are little, they act out in ways where they're wanting attention, right?
Mhm.
And I've seen this with friends who have littles over the years where like the kids could be just little hellions. The
Yeah.
adults are trying to have a quiet dinner or they're trying to hang out and play a board game or whatnot. And the kids are just nonstop, nonstop, nonstop. Pay attention to me in essence, right? And it's like
Mhm.
you go and you take 5 or 10 minutes and you play with the kiddos and it fills that cup and they're good to go. And then you can go back to the whatever the adult behavior is, the adult activity that doesn't change as the kids get older. They just act differently. And
Right.
again, one of the things that we talked about earlier on today is that oftentimes those behaviors when the kids are older have more gravitas, right? Have more immediacy, more grave results when the kids get older in a lot of cases. These are great opportunities for just that kind of filling their cup, and it fills ours at the same time, which is what I love.
Yes, it absolutely fills ours as well. So it's so important to try to sneak in those few moments every once in a while. Even if you're
Hmm.
like, oh, my kid doesn't want to, they're hiding in their bedroom. I can tell you, they actually do want to.
Hmm.
They're going to like, kick and scream a little bit, but they do know and appreciate when their parents are trying to connect with them.
Absolutely.
So
All right.
it's
So,
normal for them to like push back, but don't
right.
take that as like they don't want to be with me. They do. You just need
Hmm.
to pull sometimes.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. So, hydration, physical movement, eating well,
Meditation.
meditation. Thank you.
This is my
What
favorite one
else?
coming. This is my absolute favorite. It's sleep. Oh, sleep is so, so crucial. They actually say, like, if it's between waking up early to exercise or getting extra sleep, get the extra sleep. Sleep impacts our mental health, it impacts our physical health, it impacts our productivity at work and at school, it impacts everything. As
Hmm.
parents, you need to be modeling that sleep is important, that you
Hmm.
also know that you need to sleep, and that
Hmm.
you, as a parent, should not be up at 2 in the morning doing dishes. And you laugh at that, being like, no one does that. Oh, but they do.
Oh, yeah.
I was out to dinner with friends and they're all talking about a text chain. And I'm like, what are you guys talking about? I'm not on this text chain. They're like, oh, it's our 2 in the morning text chain. Why are you all up at 2 in the morning? They're doing dishes, they're cleaning, they're doing work they didn't get done. That is not okay. Parents, if
Mm-mm.
you feel like you need to be up at 2 in the morning doing this stuff, you have too much on your plate. You need to respect boundaries and you need to start saying no. So
Mhm.
for
Mhm.
kids, you need to have a consistent bedtime where these kids need to be shutting down. And let me also tell you, no electronics should be in their bedroom.
Correct, yeah.
And that is so important because if a child is not getting enough sleep, the next morning is not going to go well. It's going to be an uphill battle from the moment they get up.
And it just snowballs, it feels like.
It completely snowballs. It's so important to really respect how important sleep actually is. It is so important. I actually went back and got certified as a sleep science coach and opened up an entire another business to work with adults on sleep because it is crucial.
It's that important, yeah.
It's that important. Again, like
Absolutely.
lack of sleep leads to like type 2 diabetes, stroke, heart attacks. You can't focus in school. You're grumpy. You can't
Mhm,
problem solve. Think of what you feel like when you're on a lack of sleep. Now
mhm.
imagine these kids being up, especially teenagers in their bedroom till 1, 2 in the morning and having to get up at, 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning for school.
So, when you've got the 15-year-old, for example, I see this in myself going back a couple of decades, right? "Oh, but I've still got homework. I've got this, I've got that," because I was driven, I wanted good grades, and the expectation at home was that I get good grades.
Mhm.
Right? And there's a balance there because I could hear parents going, "But my kid has so much homework. My kid has so many activities. Da, 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 da." They're up until whatever o'clock trying to get it all done. And then they got to get up and do it all again the next morning. What do we need to look at in that? Because sleep it is important, but I also
Mhm.
don't disagree with parents that grades are important. If we have, for example, a college bound kiddo
Right.
or the athletics, if they're in athletics, there's movement, there's teamwork,
Mhm.
there's so many good things that come from those.
Absolutely.
Where's that balance? How do we strike that balance?
It's all about balance because if you are telling me that your child can't get everything done until 1 in the morning, I'm telling you your child is overscheduled
Mhm,
and that their mental health needs to come above and beyond anything else in their schedule. So
mhm,
at times you do need to cut back because at times these kids are completely and utterly overscheduled. And the other thing
mhm,
with homework, even, I work with college kids at Ivy Leagues. I work, all over the place. And I will tell you, they should be able to get their homework done in a reasonable hour. And lots of times when they're not, it's because their phone is distracting them. It's because they're not actually focused. It's because they're so tired they didn't pick up what was being taught that day. And now they're basically having to relearn everything that was taught that day, plus do their homework.
mhm,
So, yeah, as a parent, it's really scary to take that step back and be like, I'm cutting you off at 11 o'clock, lights are off, homework done or not. But it's going to take a few days of that to help them restructure and be able to go to school and actually be able to take in the information and learn, and then be more productive when they actually get home to do their homework.
Right. Well, and
But
that
it
also
is
speaks to,
hard days, you know?
say that again?
It's a few days of really hard saying like, no, you have to be done at 11:30.
Mhm. Well, and that also speaks to other aspects of executive function, and they may need support with that. I like that you
Mhm.
said take the phones out of the room potentially, and limit. Then again, like the iPhones are connected to the Macs, that their texts still come through. Like I'll be tutoring a student, and I'll hear the dings going off nonstop in the background during a tutoring session. The parents have paid good money for. The kids are still getting distracted, so I see that on the regular, but there's also other supports that we could bring in to help kids if that's the case, help them learn to
Absolutely.
manage those types of things more effectively. All right, Keri, you've given us 5 things. Can you recap all of them? Hydration, physical movement, eating
Hydration,
well,
physical
meditation,
movement, eating well, meditation, and
and
sleep.
sleep. And that's a perfect segue, because as we wrap up this portion of the conversation here momentarily, Keri and I are actually going to have a conversation exclusively for members of the Parent Tween Village about sleep, about how to help make those days a little bit easier when you're trying to transition into actually cutting them off, or like why sleep is so important. We're going to go down the sleep rabbit hole, as it were, a little bit more, and give families insight about how to make that more effective. If you want to connect with Keri, you can connect with her at Keri Cooper Holistic Therapy. It's Keri Cooper, holistictherapy.com. And you're on pretty much all the social places, right, Keri?
I am, and it's all like Keri Cooper Holistic Therapy. Yes.
Awesome. 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 Keri, any closing thoughts for parents as we round out this part of our conversation?
It's hard. It is hard, but putting in these simple foundations make it a little bit easier. And again, my book's available on Amazon, Mental Health Uncensored, 10 Foundations Every Parent Needs to Know. And there's also a workbook on there for teens.
Fantastic. Awesome. All right, everyone. Make sure to like and follow, whether you're catching us on our Facebook page, our LinkedIn page, or our YouTube channel. You can also come over and join us in our Facebook group, very simply parenttweenconnection.com. And Keri, we will see you momentarily in Parent Tween Village. Have a great
Great.
one, everybody.